Welcome to Across the Table, a series of conversations with people who influence the homeschool world. I'm Gina Grothoff, founder of Charlotte Homeschooling, and your host. In this series of videos, we will introduce you to individuals who can provide you with resources and information to help you along your homeschool journey. Today, we introduce you to Jennifer Cook-DeRosa, a homeschool mother who has written the book, Homeschooling for College Credit. Join us now for a conversation with Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Cook-DeRosa. My husband Tom and I have been married for 20 years. We have 4 sons. Our youngest son is 8 and our oldest son is 18. We have been homeschooling all along, and we are excited to graduate our oldest this May from homeschool. And we have spent most of our lives in Illinois, and we just most recently moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where we live now. We began homeschooling, I think, in a time when not many people were homeschooling. And so I would say that the initial reasons we began homeschooling are not necessarily the things that kept us homeschooling through the years. But initially, we didn't live in a great neighborhood when we were newly married. We lived where we could afford, like people do. And so we started homeschooling preschool, and I got to be a stay-at-home mom right away. So I was very interaction with my son, and I just kind of felt like we would homeschool preschool and kindergarten, and maybe we would have an opportunity to move to a better school district as he got school age. But we were still in the same home when kindergarten registration came around, and my son was doing great. And so the idea was just to kind of continue as long as it worked. Eventually, as we added more children and homeschooling was working for us, we continued to do it. My trade is as a chef, and so the type of college training that I had was an associate degree through a trade school, and that is very different from maybe the traditional 4-year experience that most people have. So as we started getting into the middle school years, and I started to do some research into college, I knew that I would have to be a guidance counselor for my kids, and it was in a foreign language to me. It just completely was something I didn't know about. I had never even taken English 101. I had never taken a lot of the classes that are freshman classes, because they just weren't taught to chefs. So when the time came, I started doing some reading and research, and I found out that at the college where I was teaching culinary arts, we had a testing center that administered college credit exams called CLEP exams. So we were a testing center for that. Even though I didn't know that, I had been working there maybe 12 years at the time. So I basically took one of the exams to see what was involved in taking a CLEP exam and earning college credit, and just to kind of familiarize myself with the process a little bit. To fast forward, I got into a habit of taking these tests, and on my own, I took and passed about 20 of the exams before the testing center staff said, "What are you going to do with these tests and this credit that you're accumulating?" And I didn't really have a plan. I didn't know. But I did then research a little bit and found that I could earn my bachelor's degree. And that's how I kind of got into going back to school. I didn't need it necessarily for my field, but I had done some of the credit already on my own independently. We were also homeschooling, and so I thought, why don't homeschool students take advantage of this? We already teach these classes to our kids, and we already are working on these same types of subjects. What would be so different about having something like a CLEP exam, for instance, as our final exam in the home? And so that is sort of what led me down that path. After I'd completed my own degree, most of my general education classes were through testing. I had a much better concept of the vocabulary that's used in college world, and It helped me with my job. I mean, I was working in a college and I didn't even know these programs exist. So I don't think most people do know that they exist. And I just couldn't understand why there wasn't already that information out there to help homeschool families or to even help just regular high school kids make that transition into college. I look at it a little bit differently. I think there are some barriers that we can remove, and some of those include things like busy work. And generally the students who don't complete a degree will do it because they can't keep up the pace for so long. And some students may take 4, 5, 6, 7 years just to earn their degree. And of course, what seems okay when you're 18 isn't nearly as practical when you're in your 20s and maybe you're starting a family and so on. So I think that all of that with homeschooling, with earning college credit, it allows our kids to start a little bit ahead. Not that they would necessarily be using this to graduate college early, but what it allows them to do then is to kind of take a breather. Maybe our student isn't ready to take a full-time load right when they get out of high school. So having a little bit of credit going in allows them maybe just to take a more manageable course load too. The fear that I had really was because I believed all of the myths about college entrance. What I have found is that getting into college isn't nearly as hard as getting out. Getting in isn't a factor like it maybe used to be, and getting out is what's difficult. So the first fear would be the fear that my son can get into college or that my daughter can get into college coming out of a homeschool program. And of course they can. There are roughly 25 to 50 colleges that are going to have a competitive admission in the United States, but the other several thousand colleges don't. And so a lot of the times the stories that come from the fierce competition of getting in and all of the requirements and all of these things that we as moms worry about and we build into our curriculum are really meant only to meet the needs of a very small amount of schools that our child may not even be interested in attending. And so I think that fear of our child being able to get into college is really is a myth that we need to let go of, because in fact not only are homeschool kids getting into college, but they're being recruited in some cases. Colleges now have entire departments and entire staffs dedicated sometimes to how to handle homeschool admissions. I know my biggest fear, which started very early on, was if I would be able to guide my child. Initially, I thought that a high school guidance counselor would be the best person to guide my children. I had even considered sending my kids to high school. A lot of people encouraged me to consider that for the high school years, and I almost did. However, if you consider that you're really the one who cares most about your child's well-being and their future and all of the decisions that they're about to make, then you really still are the best person to help them through that process. And it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that everything is going to go exactly according to plan. It never does. But I think that worrying about being the guidance counselor is part of it, but it's not going to be as bad and as scary as long as you just take a little bit of time to do some reading and go through that process. You don't have to know it all right away. I equate it to using a travel agent. There's nothing wrong with using a travel agent to book a vacation, but in most cases it's not necessary. In most cases, any of us can figure out how to book a hotel room or an airplane ticket without paying a commission to someone else. And so when you start looking, there are definitely a lot of companies out there that you can hire that will provide the same information that's available to you for free, whether it's financial aid information, whether it's how to prepare a homeschool transcript, which is easy, how to apply for financial aid, which is free and easy, And any of those things that maybe seem intimidating in the beginning, there are definitely companies that you can hire to do those things for you. But at no part in the process is there anything that's too difficult for an average person attending an average school to do. I think one of the overlooked resources to look into is your community college in your area. The stigma of attending a community college isn't there. We spoke earlier about the elite colleges, and while it may be true that in some very narrow majors, yes, there may be some disadvantages to taking a lab science, for instance, in one setting versus another, but that really only is applicable to 5% of the kids that are going to be going to college. So again, let's not apply the myths of the very elite group of kids to everyone. And if you look in your community, you may find access to dual enrollment opportunities at the high school level. So a student essentially gets college credit for their course that they're taking at the community college, and then also you give them homeschool credit for that. So if your child wanted to take college algebra, they would go to the campus and they would take the course with an instructor, just as any enrolled student would do. And then that would also be their high school credit as well. A student may be just taking 1 or 2 classes a year, even if they just wanted to do it in the summer, would be able to complete most of their freshman year ahead of their peers, and when they graduate, they've already got a good chunk of their 2-year degree completed if they want to do that. A 2-year degree is a fraction of the price of a 4-year degree, and what a lot of people don't know is that community colleges have written articulation agreements with the 4-year schools, which means if you complete the requirements of that 2-year degree, that degree is accepted as a block of credit. And the reason that that's important is because if you are completing the courses and the exams and other credit earning opportunities at home, and you don't have those credits rolled into an associate degree, when you apply then to a 4-year school, they'll individually evaluate each of those credits that you've accumulated. So they may decide yes to one, no to another, yes to one, no to another. If you complete an associate degree first, they then just take them as a group, and they're going to accept all 60 credits. That is very affordable, number one, and generally you're going to have a smaller class size. You can usually stay in your community, and you can still homeschool the rest of your day, but this transitionary period of your child going to the community college is a great way for them to start college and do so, affordably, and while you're still at home and able to give them some more guidance and advice. In reality, if you look at the cost of, let's say, earning a college algebra credit at home, okay? If you wanted to do dual enrollment, we're lucky here in Charlotte, that's free, but in many places it's not. In Illinois, where we lived before, it wasn't free. So it would cost maybe $300 to enroll in that class. If you did it at home using your homeschool curriculum, whatever brand you're used to for your math, if you teach your child that way in the way that you've always taught them, and they attempted to test out of the college algebra CLEP exam, that would cost them $80 to attempt. If they failed the exam, there's no record of that, there's no disclosure required, there's no risk. If they wanted to take it again, they could try that in 6 months. So that $80 investment, the parent could say, well, it may or may not transfer. How will I know? My son hasn't picked a school. How will I know if they will take that exam? They may not take it. But learning college algebra in high school is a great idea, and if they have to take it as a class later, then so be it. They'll have had some experience in the subject and mastery will come easier. If the college does give them credit for it, they've invested $80 in a class that at a private school would cost about $3,000. So, it's a tremendous savings. So when you talk about scholarships, okay, the amount of work, for instance, to go into a National Merit Scholarship, which is $2,000-ish, is huge and very competitive. where you could create a CLEP scholarship, or call it what you want, a homemade scholarship for yourself, for your child, about $5,000 worth, just from doing a couple classes, or maybe one per year of high school. So it's a tremendous way to almost guarantee a huge cost savings on the front end, not to mention time.